This video is about the specifications for your project. You cannot build a building with only drawings. You also need to supplement the drawings with specifications. And the specifications are designed dependent on the procurement form you use. In other words, either individual trade contracts or main contracts. And the people in the group can decide which form of procurement they want to use for the 5th semester project. If you choose individual trade contracts, the organization would look like this. You would have a client, and the client would have a contract with each trade contractor. For example, you would have a contract with the groundworks, with the masonry and the carpentry, each of them according to GC 92. It would be up to the architect or the engineer to coordinate the building on site, and you can say that this form of contract or procurement form would be used by professional builders, such as, for example, McDonald's, who build a lot of restaurants, and chains of supermarkets like Aldi, who build also several different supermarkets every single day actually. Before you start doing your calculation, you should break down your contracts by making a summary of contracts in individual trade contracts and making this work breakdown structure. And for example, if you look at masonry, masonry is broken down into different elements. The purpose of this is to do a calculation for the architects in the beginning, but later on it's going to be used to design the tender forms. As you can see, if you go back to the masonry contract, the tender form is designed in accordance with this work breakdown structure. And the purpose of that is to compare the incoming bids from the contractors with the calculation that the architect did at scheme design. In other words, in individual trade contracts, each contractor would be given the case specifications for orientation, and each contractor, depending on which work he's got, will be given his own work specifications. And under each work specifications there will be a number of building component specifications. For example, here under this one there are under the joiner is the person who does the furnishings inside the house. He has to do the floors, the doors and the kitchens. In other words, a type of carpenter. If the form of procurement is main contracts, then the organization would look like this. You'd have the client and one main contractor, and the client has a contract with the main contractor. The architect is only a consultant in this case. The main contractor produces something himself. For example, he could do the concrete works, and he would subcontract all the other contracts to subcontractors. And the main contractor, would have a contract with each subcontractor. The client has only one contractor in this project, and that's the main contractor. So the work breakdown structure for a main contract looks like this. You have the main contract at the top, and then you have his own production, which is split up like this, and you have the subcontractors down here, and again we have the masonry contract split up like this. So if we look at the main contractor's tender forms, you can see we have the total main contract, which is the same as the top tier of the work breakdown structure, and this is followed by all the subcontracts, including the main contractor's own works, which is listed up here, and you can see it here on the second tier. And finally here, if we look at the masonry contract here, it's broken down according to its building components, and this is represented here. So you can see that in the scheme design, when the architect does the work breakdown structure, it relates to the tender forms as well. And if you look at the organization, again, the main contractor gets the case specifications, and each subcontractor gets work specifications, which are split up into building component specifications. The specifications themselves are actually used by different people in the contractor's project organization. the most important one, well, the most important one from a judicial point of view is the case specifications. This is used at the management or the administrative level of the contractor's organization, and it deals with orientation. It's telling people about what's going on in this project, and it's also telling things about GC92. In other words, if something goes wrong in the project, how do we deal with the problems? So the case specification is sometimes called the common conditions for the project. It is not really a pricing document, it's more an orientation document. And you can see it's used by the executive management in the project. Whereas the work specifications is used on the site in order to build the building. In other words, it's used by the foreman who delegates work to different people under him. And you can see that here. He's got the helmet on. The building component specifications, which is part of the work specifications, is used by the operatives to actually build the building on the scaffolding. So these are the people we're writing the building component specifications for, and therefore we shouldn't write them in a very, very complex language with things like Eurocodes and so on, because these people here don't know anything about Eurocodes. Regardless of the procurement form, i.e. main contracting or individual trade contracts, each contractor gets a case specification. In the case of main contractors, there's only one contractor, the main contractor. In case of individual trade contracts, there are several contractors, so each of those contractors get a case specification, which is the same for all the contractors. It's simply orientation. And here you can see the case specifications at the top of the tree. Each contractor gets a work specification, which applies to their particular contract. For main contractors, each works contractor gets a work specification for their contract. And here you can see the second tier. And each of the building components in a work specification gets a building component specification. And that's on the last tier. This is a simplified actually list of the things in the case specification. Again, it's only used for orientation and it's used at the administrative level. So it tells something about the building case. It gives a summary of all the different works involved in the contract or in the project, and it tells how the project documents are organized regarding drawing numbers, how the drawing number system works. It gives a project organization overview. This could be a simple chart showing who's in charge, who's consultant, etc., etc. All the amendments to GC92 are written here. It tells about the building site. It's orientation to different contractors about who takes care of what on the building site. But it's not pricing. It's not for pricing. It's just for orientation. It tells about the health and safety plan. It tells about how to deal with the surrounding environment with regard to noise, vibration and dust. It tells about general information about quality assurance on the building site, and it tells about planning and scheduling. If you look at each of these items on the list, each of these items has a work specification. For example, the masonry contract here would have their own work specifications. And if you look at the work specifications, this is used for pricing of the contract. So anything you forget to mention in here will not be priced. And if this goes to the building site, then any works that are not mentioned here will be extra works and will cost the contractor extra money, or rather the client extra money. The contractor will ask the client for extra money for things that are not mentioned here. So it's very important that this is done absolutely precisely by mentioning everything that's included in it. And if we look at it, you can see, for example, this is masonry, and the masonry has a summary of building components. You have to do the roof, you have to do the brickwork, repairs, you have to do the masonry on the extension, repairs to the internal brickwork, kitchen tiles, etc., etc. Everything here has its own building component specifications. So if we look at one of these, that would have their own building component specifications, which means what drawing should I use to build this particular item, what materials are used in that item, what the execution should be and what the relation should be to other work. So this is going to be used for pricing, and this is going to be used for actually building it on the site. And everything here in this section 2, all the way down here, is about pricing. So if there's any design work to be done by the contractor, it will be mentioned here. If this contractor has to do anything on the building site, it'll be mentioned here. For example, supply of WC and welfare cabins. If it's mentioned here, it will be priced. Health and safety. If this contractor has to put up a barrier for safety, it'll be mentioned here because it's going to cost money to put it up. If he has to do anything to protect the surrounding environment, it must be mentioned here because it's going to cost money. Quality assurance, it costs money to quality assure, and it costs money for him to take part in scheduling the work. If this contractor has to deliver samples, for example, if he has to put up a life-size sample of a bathroom, for example, you have to mention it here. That's going to cost him money. The next section is about specifications. In other words, which norms are going to be used, which material requirements are there, and demands for execution, etc. So everything mentioned in these specifications is going to cost money, and if you forget to mention them here, it'll cost the client extra when the project goes on site. So don't forget to mention things here. This is just a simplified version of the specifications. The real versions are put up as templates. This is the template for the case specifications. As you can see, there's a table of contents, and then there's a section for GC92, which is of course the conditions of the contract we will work with in the 5th semester. The idea behind this one is to look at the right hand side and fill in all the X's on the right hand side. For example, if the contractor X is marked here, you have to write which contractor. Is it the masonry contractor, the carpentry contractor, or whatever? So on the right hand side of each of these pages, you have to fill in the X's, and that is basically done as a group. So each member of the group you're in will have some part of these to fill in, and make sure that they're all related to your project. For the work specifications, you can see here, again, we have the work specifications, and here you look at the things I've written here in red and fill them out. They ask you some questions that you need to answer. So you have the table of contents here, and then you have to go in and write, for example, the building components. List all the building components in this particular work specification. If this is a masonry contract, then there will be roof tiles, there will be external walls, there will be tiles in bathrooms, etc. And then there's something here that says the following components delivered by the employer or other contractor are mounted as part of this contract. In other words, someone's going to come on site and give you something and you have to mount it for them. Or somebody will come in and interrupt your work and put in some stuff while you're doing your work, and those things are mentioned here. So look at the red marked, the questions marked in red, and fill them out for your work specifications. And also look at the tender control plan here and fill that out. There is some theory as a attached file on this spreadsheet that you should look at. And basically, once all this is filled in, you have filled in everything that needs to be priced. You also have to fill in the Euro codes and so on for the project. And those codes come in under norms and standards here, 311, and you fill in the norms and standards and the material requirements, etc. Those are the standards for doing the work. In other words, they're called references. And chapter 4 here is the building component specification. So you fill in one of these for each member of the group, and this is to do with the drawings you've been given to do in detailed design 2. So for example, if you're doing the bathroom, you would do one building component specification that strictly looks at the bathroom, where you tell us where do I find the bathroom, what drawings do I use for the bathroom, you list the drawings up here, what are the adjoining components, is there any design involved, what materials and products should I use, how should I execute the bathroom, what sort of surfaces should I leave the bathroom with, tolerances, etc. What test samples should I set up? Should I set up a whole bathroom first, etc., etc. So these, chapter 4 is the building component specification. And that ends this video about specification.